G'day everyone and welcome to week 8 of LA 3006 Administrative Law. Now right the way through this course you've all gotten completely sick and tired of me reminding you over and over again that the judicial review process conducts legal review, not merits review. That it reviews whether a decision was made lawfully, not whether the decision was any good. And I'm willing to bet that some of you have thought, well, that actually kind of sucks, because if a public servant follows all the rules, but still makes an awful decision, then why shouldn't the people affected by that awful decision be able to do something about it? I mean, as a community, we don't just expect public servants to make lawful decisions, we want them to make good decisions. What's the use of administrative law if it only knocks out unlawful decisions and not awful decisions? Well, the Kerr Committee back in the 1970s agreed. They said, and I'm obviously paraphrasing here, they said that the courts really can't make executive decisions, so the courts really can't undertake merits review, but there's nothing to stop the government establishing a new executive body whose job is to review the decisions made by other executive bodies. This is just like a senior public servant reviewing the decisions made by a more junior public servant, except it would be a specialist review body. Now, a specialist review body which lives within the executive would not be offending the separation of powers if it undertook merits review. It was a very clever solution, and the government took it up, passing the Administrative Appeals Tribunal Act 1975. The Administrative Appeals Tribunal, the AAT, operated successfully for nearly 50 years, with the support of governments from both political persuasions. A major reform period happened around 2015 when a number of specialist tribunals, including the Migration Review Tribunal, the Refugee Review Tribunal and the Social Security Review Tribunal, were folded into the AAT as separate divisions. This had been recommended in reports as early as 1995. By 2021, the Labor-dominated Senate Legal and Constitutional References Committee called for the replacement of the Administrative Appeals Tribunal with a new Administrative Review Tribunal. This had also been a recommendation of the earlier 1995 report. The main reform proposed by the 2021 report was around the appointment of tribunal members, which was at that time rather informal, more like the appointment of judges than the appointment of public servants. A more structured, transparent system of appointments was considered necessary. Now, those changes could have been made as reforms to the pre-existing Administrative Appeals Tribunal, but after the Albanese government was elected in 2022, Attorney General Mark Dreyfus saw the opportunity to take a partisan swipe at the previous Liberal government, accusing it of stacking the AAT with political appointees. There's no real evidence that the business of the AAT was ever tainted by politics in any realistic way, but having taken a big swipe, Dreyfus called for major reform. These videos are being made during 2024, when the legislation for the new Administrative Review Tribunal has been introduced to Parliament but not yet passed. The Administrative Appeals Tribunal is continuing to just do its thing, staring down the hangman and getting the job done. So the videos this week will contain a cool transition. We'll look at the AAT and keep referring to the legislation proposed for the new ART. The most interesting thing about the whole process is how similar they are, not how different they are. Let's start with the question of jurisdiction. As a tribunal, the AAT has a limited jurisdiction. Essentially, the Parliament establishes the AAT, and so the Parliament establishes those decisions which the AAT is allowed to review. We find that set out in Section 25 of the AAT Act, which says that an enactment may provide that applications may be made to the tribunal for the review of decisions. Clause 12 of the new Administrative Review Tribunal Bill does exactly the same thing. What this means in a practical sense is that there isn't a single instrument where we can identify all of the decisions which the AAT is allowed to review or which the ART will be allowed to review. As a convenience, the AAT itself does maintain a list, but that's an informal summary. The list itself doesn't have any legal effect. Jurisdiction is granted by 400 different pieces of legislation. So the jurisdiction of the AAT or the ART comes from 400 different places. And to work out if a decision can be taken to the tribunal, we need to go to whatever enactment provides the power for that decision, to check to see whether that enactment provides for review by the tribunal. None of this is changing with the new tribunal. So for instance, let's imagine you were applying for a passport so you could go off backpacking. Well, Section 50 of the Australian Passports Act says that if a reviewable decision is made, and reviewable decisions are set in another section, Section 48, if a reviewable decision is made, then application may be made to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal for a review of that decision. It's that simple. Well, it's simple for us anyway, but even as a law student, your knowledge of the law is towering compared to the knowledge that most people have. And so there is a code of practice which requires decision makers to actually advise people of the fact that a decision is reviewable by the tribunal. So when a decision is made, the decision notification will actually include a paragraph to tell the person that if they're unhappy with the decision, they have an opportunity to take the decision to the AAT and, no doubt, to the ART once it comes into existence. Now, there are a couple of things to be careful about when it comes to the tribunal and jurisdictional issues. First up, it is often the case that a statute will do exactly what we just saw in the Australian Passports Act. The statute will pull out decisions made under a specific section of the Act, and they're the only ones you can ask the tribunal to review. So it may well be that some decisions under a piece of legislation are reviewable and others are not. It's important to be really careful to identify whether there is a clear jurisdiction on the part of the AAT. If your concern relates to a decision of an administrative character made under an enactment, and that decision is not one where the tribunal has jurisdiction, well, you can still seek legal review under the ADJR Act or the Judiciary Act, but you can't seek merits review. So that brings us to the end of our first video on merits review, the Administrative Appeals Tribunal and the Administrative Review Tribunal. We know that a tribunal is an executive body, not a judicial body. It's a tribunal, not a court. As a result, it can review the merits of a decision without offending the separation of powers. We know that the jurisdiction of the tribunal is defined within around 400 separate pieces of legislation, where the tribunal is given the power to review specific decisions. And we know that none of this is going to change with the introduction of the new Administrative Review Tribunal. Our second video this week takes us to the real heart of the material. We're going to look first at some of the challenges of conducting merits review, and we're going to look at the remedies available to the review tribunals. See you in video 2.